The delay was O'Hare's fault. The room was the storm's idea. I want to be clear about that up front, because when I tell people how things started with Lee, how we ended up stranded in the same airport hotel, in the same room, with one bed that neither of us had asked for, they always look at me like I planned it, like I engineered the whole thing. A blizzard in February, a canceled flight, a sold-out city. Sure, man, sure you did. I didn't plan it, I couldn't have. Because up until roughly 9:30 on a Tuesday night, Lee Carver was the last person on earth I would have chosen to be stranded with. We worked at the same mid-sized law firm in Chicago, Hargrove and Pell. 60-something attorneys, 2 floors of a building on West Monroe, a kitchen that always smelled like someone's reheated fish. Lee and I had been there about the same amount of time, 3 years, give or take. Both of us angling for the same associate to partner track. Both of us assigned to the same practice group, which meant we competed for the same clients, the same cases, the same FaceTime with the partners who made those decisions. She was good. That was the thing I never said out loud but always knew. She was organized in a way that made me feel chaotic. She billed more hours, remembered more details, followed up more consistently. She once caught a discrepancy in a merger document at 11 p.m. on a Friday and flagged it before anyone else had even opened the attachment. And when I heard about it, Monday morning I spent about 45 seconds being genuinely impressed before I spent the rest of the day being annoyed. We weren't enemies. I want to be precise. We were civil at meetings, professional in emails, occasionally even friendly in that hallway passing way where you ask about someone's weekend and mean it about 30%. But there was always something underneath it, a current that neither of us named. Competition has a texture. You feel it in how you listen to someone present their casework, in whether you volunteer information or wait to be asked, in whether you hold the elevator. I didn't always hold the elevator, she noticed. The Chicago trip was supposed to be simple. 1 client, 2 meetings, 1 overnight. The client was a manufacturing company out of Ohio called Rensfield, and they were in the middle of a potential acquisition that had gotten complicated enough that 2 of us needed to go. My supervising partner, Graham, chose me for the lead role and Lee as second chair, which, I'll be honest, felt like a minor victory. Lead meant I controlled the narrative in the room. Lead meant my name went on the memo. I told myself I was fine about Lee being there. I told myself it didn't matter. We took separate Ubers to O'Hare. The meetings were fine. Better than fine. Rensfield's general counsel, a methodical man named Arthur, who wore the same gray blazer both days and took handwritten notes on a legal pad, seemed pleased with where things were going. Lee and I fell into a rhythm that surprised me. She caught things I glossed over. I moved things forward when she went too deep in the weeds. We didn't coordinate it, it just happened. Afterward, Arthur took us to dinner at a steakhouse off Michigan Avenue and ordered a bottle of red wine that cost more than my first car payment. He told us about his grandkids. He told us about how he'd almost left law for architecture in his 20s. He said he was glad we came and that he felt good about where this was going. He looked at both of us when he said it. In the cab back to the airport, Lee said, "That went well." "Yeah," I said. "Arthur likes you," she said. "He likes us," I said. And I didn't know why I said it that way, only that it felt true and I wanted it acknowledged. She looked out the window. "He liked the work," she said, which was a very Lee thing to say. We got to O'Hare at 9:15 and found out our flight was canceled. It wasn't a delay. I want to be clear, delays give you hope. This was a cancellation, one word, red, on the departures board, and underneath it a small polite message about weather conditions and rebooking options that we both knew meant, not tonight. A nor'easter had moved up the coast and was doing something dramatic over Lake Michigan, and every flight to anywhere east of here was grounded until morning, at the earliest. We stood at the United counter for 20 minutes. The gate agent was apologetic in the professional way. That means they've said this exact thing 300 times this week and have run out of actual sympathy. They could rebook us on the 6:50 a.m. They could not guarantee a 6:50 a.m. Hotels near the airport were, she said with the grimace of someone delivering news they knew was bad, basically gone. Lee pulled out her phone before I did. She was already scrolling. "Marriott's out," she said. "Hilton? $450 a night. 1 room left. What kind of room?" She paused. "Just slightly. King." I stood there. "There's a Hyatt," I said. "Sold out? Holiday Inn?" She looked up from her phone and at me directly. I found a Hampton about 2 miles from here. One room, two queens. Book it, I said immediately. Already did, she said, which told me she'd found it before she told me about the Marriott, which told me she'd been managing the situation while I was still processing it, which was infuriating and also exactly the kind of thing she did. The Hampton Inn in Rosemont, Illinois, at 9:45 on a Tuesday in February, is not a place designed to make you feel good about anything. The lobby smelled like the cleaning product they use to make lobbies smell like nothing. The woman at the front desk had the look of someone who'd checked in 11 stranded travelers in the last 2 hours and was running out of warm smiles. She slid us our keys, two separate key cards, which I accepted as a small victory, and told us the elevator was on the right. The room was on the fourth floor. Two queen beds, a window with a view of a parking structure, a TV bolted to the dresser, and a small round table with two chairs that seemed designed for people to eat sad takeout across from each other, which is exactly what we eventually did. We stood in the doorway for a moment. I'll take that one, Lee said, pointing to the bed closer to the window. Fine, I said. We'd been in the room for approximately 4 minutes when she said, without looking up from her laptop, "You should send Graham an update tonight." I was going to, I said. Before midnight, she said. He's going to see the flight cancellation and wonder. I know how Graham works. Okay, she said, in the tone that means she didn't entirely believe me, but was choosing not to push it. I sent Graham an update at 11:47. I don't know why I'm telling you that. We ordered Thai food from a place nearby that was still delivering, which was either brave or desperate on their part. We ate at the little round table. She had pad see ew. I had pad ki mao. She stole one of my dumplings without asking, and I decided to let it happen, because the night had already been long enough. Arthur's going to sign, she said. Probably, I said. Not probably. He's going to sign. He said, I feel good about where this is going 3 times. Arthur's not a man who repeats himself. She was right. I knew she was right. I said, we still need to nail the diligence phase. We will. Graham's going to want to lead the next meeting himself. Probably, she said, using it back at me, and she almost smiled. There was a pause. One of those pauses that fills up with something. You were good in there today, I said. With the IP question, I didn't know that case. She looked at me, like she was checking whether I was setting something up. I wasn't. I was just saying it because it was true, and sitting on it felt petty. You handled the financials better than I expected, she said. What does that mean? It means I've seen you rush through numbers in internal meetings, she said. You didn't rush today because it mattered today. It matters every time, she said. Not mean, just direct. I didn't have a comeback for that. She wasn't wrong. At some point, the food was gone, and we'd moved from the table. Her back to the bed with her laptop, me on mine with a brief I was supposed to have reviewed 2 days ago. The storm was audible now, something low and constant against the window. The parking structure was dusted white. I don't know who turned the lights down. I think we both just stopped needing them. Can I ask you something? I said, around 1 in the morning. You're going to regardless, she said. Why do you always send a follow-up email the same day? Like, within an hour, she looked over. Because people's attention is sharpest right after a meeting. If you send a summary, the next morning they've already started rewriting what happened in their memory. I thought about it. That's actually a good reason. I know. You could have just said that instead of making me feel like an idiot every time I sent mine the next morning. You never asked, she said. You also never told me. She set her laptop aside, leaned back against the headboard and looked at the ceiling. We're not exactly in the habit of telling each other things. No, I said. We're not. Another pause. This one was different. I felt it in the way you feel a change in air pressure before it rains. Whose fault is that? She asked. Not accusatory, genuinely curious. Both of ours, I said. Yeah, she said. Probably. I fell asleep before she did. I know because I woke up at 4 something and the lamp on her side was still on, and she'd fallen asleep sitting up, laptop still open, the screen gone dark. She'd pulled a pillow across her chest at some point. Her hair had come loose from wherever she'd pinned it. I thought about waking her up. She'd have wanted to be woken up. Bad neck, probably, sleeping like that. I didn't wake her up right away. I stayed there in the dark for a few minutes, just looking at her. Not in a weird way, just in the way you look at someone when they're not performing anything, and you realize the version of them you've been carrying around in your head was only partial. 3 years of working beside someone, and this was the first time I'd seen her with her guard down. No emails, no follow-ups, no catching my errors in front of Graham. Just a person, asleep in a storm. I said her name quietly. She startled awake, grabbed the laptop before it slid, looked at me with the confused squint of someone who doesn't know where they are yet. You fell asleep sitting up, I said. She looked around, took stock. What time is it? 4:15. She closed the laptop, lay down properly, pulled the blanket up. Thank you, she said in a voice that was too honest for defenses. Just 2 words with nothing behind them, but meaning them. Yeah, I said, and I turned off her lamp. The 6:50 flight was delayed until 8:30, then 8:30 to 10. We sat in the terminal at a gate that smelled like bad coffee and cinnamon rolls from a place that seemed wildly optimistic about what travelers wanted at 7 a.m. She had the coffee. I had the cinnamon roll. We didn't negotiate it. It just split that way. She was reading something on her iPad. I was pretending to read something on mine. I've been thinking about what you said, she said without looking up. About both of our faults. Yeah? I think it's mostly mine, she said. The dynamic. The way things went between us. I looked at her. Why would it be mostly yours? Because I knew what I was doing, she said. When I'd send a summary before you, when I'd mention something you missed in a meeting, I told myself it was just being thorough. But I knew how it landed. I knew what I was doing too, I said. The elevator. She looked up. What about the elevator? I didn't always hold it, I said. She stared at me. And then slowly, like something unlocking, she laughed. It was a real laugh, surprised, unguarded, slightly disbelieving. I knew it, she said. I literally knew it. I'm sorry, I said. You should be, she said, still laughing a little. That's so petty. It was very petty, I agreed. She shook her head, looked back at her iPad, but she was still smiling. The plane was a regional jet. 42 seats, overhead bins that fit nothing, the sound of the engine slightly too loud for comfort. We sat next to each other. Not because we had to. The flight wasn't full. We both just ended up in the same row. She fell asleep again 20 minutes in, head against the window, arms crossed. Somewhere over Indiana, she listed slightly sideways, and her head came to rest on my shoulder. I stayed very still. I thought about the meeting. About Arthur saying I feel good about where this is going 3 times. About the Thai food and the round table and the lamp she'd left on. About 3 years of a current neither of us named. I thought, oh, the kind of oh that isn't really a question, the kind that's the answer arriving late. I didn't move my shoulder. I watched Indiana turn into Ohio, and I thought about what you do when you realize something too large to unrealize. Nothing happened on the flight. I want to be clear about that too, because people always expect a moment, a hand held, a thing set at altitude that can be blamed on cabin pressure. There wasn't. She woke up somewhere over Ohio, looked at my shoulder, looked at me and said, sorry in that brisk way that means she was embarrassed. It's fine, I said. I didn't sleep well. I know, I said. You were up until 4. She looked at me again. Something shifted in her expression, not dramatically, just slightly, the way a sentence changes meaning when you move the emphasis. We didn't say anything else until we landed. The office the next day was the same as it always was. Fluorescent lights, the fish smell from the kitchen, someone's birthday cupcakes in the break room. Graham called us into his office at 10 and told us we'd done excellent work, which he followed immediately with a detailed list of everything he wanted done differently in the next phase. That was Graham's version of a compliment. Lee and I walked out of his office together, stewed for a moment in the hallway. Excellent work, she said, with a dryness that only worked if you just sat through what we'd sat through. Followed by 17 corrections, I said. 15, she said. I counted. I held the elevator. She noticed. I know she noticed because she paused before stepping in just for a half second and looked at me the way you look at someone when something small is actually telling you something large. She stepped in. I followed. Same-day summaries, I said, as the doors closed. What? I'm going to start sending them same day. You were right about the attention window. She looked at me. Okay, she said. You could say thank you, I said. You could have been doing it for 3 years, she said. Fair, I said. The elevator opened. She walked out and then, just before she turned toward her office, she looked back. Coffee, she said. Thursday, not the stuff from the kitchen. It was not a question. It was not an entirely invitation. It was very Lee. which is to say it was a door held open just slightly, with plausible deniability attached. Yeah, I said. Thursday. I don't have a clean way to end this, which is maybe the most honest thing I can tell you about it. We had coffee Thursday. We had coffee the Thursday after that. We talked about the Rensfield deal, then about other things, then about the kinds of things you only talk about when you've stopped being careful. It was slow. We were both too stubborn for it to be anything else. What I can tell you is that the partnership track announcement came 6 months later. One spot. They gave it to a third year named Will Ponder, who'd come over from a white shoe firm in New York and had frankly a better book of business than either of us at that point. Lee came and found me afterward. Said, "Well, that's frustrating." "Extremely," I said. "We did good work on Rensfield," she said. "We did." She sat down across from me, looked at me in the direct way she had. "Graham said there's another review cycle in 18 months. I know, we'd have a better shot," she said, "if we co-chaired more. Jointly. The data on co-chair partnerships going to partner is lay," I said. She stopped. "Is that actually what you're asking me right now?" I said. She held eye contact for a moment. Then she looked down at the table, then back up, and this time she didn't have the armor on. "No," she said quietly. "It's not." "Okay," I said. "Good." Outside the window, it was March. The last of the snow was going gray at the edges, the city doing what it does when it decides winter is over. We stayed in my office for another hour, the door slightly open, not talking about the partnership track at all. The storm had been O'Hare's fault. The room had been the weather's idea. What happened after? That was ours.